Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast with Alexandra McGuigan. She is CEO and founder at Inclusive Asset Management, IMA. We are going to talk about diversity, inclusion in asset management, which is an interesting field. Alexandra is also Global Director of Strategic Initiative at 100 Women in Finance. She's in Singapore. Interesting being, I had a conversation with her last time, I think it was a couple of days ago, and I found Alexandra very interesting, and you're going to discover her in the next couple of minutes. This podcast is brought to you by potbar.com. If you want to start scale, be invited to podcast. I can help you do that. We can help you find sponsors. We can help you monetize podcasting because a bunch of people start podcasts and just quit after a couple of episodes. Yet podcasts can be very profitable, apart from the fact that you can meet amazing people, learn from them, and even get clients. So Alexandra, welcome to the pod. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and Inclusive Asset Management?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for having me. First of all, at the end of your day, the beginning of my day in Singapore. So probably after my coffees, I'm a bit fresh and ready to go. So my background is I'm an institutional salesperson, I would say by trade, if you will. Wore out a lot of shoe leather running around trying to sell institutional products, mostly in the liquid alternative space, but I've worked across asset class and strategy type with different institutional investors. And if I'm not sure of the audience, but institutional investors would be investors like pen plans, sovereign wealth funds, endowments and foundations, etc. So selling big products to them. Then I moved to Singapore 5 years ago and set up my own business. And I've been working with 100 Women in Finance as a consultant, doing various different roles, but currently the role that I'm doing is Director of Strategic Initiatives, which got me into a very interesting space because the company's a US company and the time zone isn't so friendly from Singapore. So I got a little bit burnt out by doing calls between, you would probably know this better than I, but 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. at night time, you don't get much rest. So I've been doing different things, working on strategic initiatives, and that has really got me interested in the DEI space. And I did a report for 100 Women in Finance, which analysed the data of Morningstar and PitchBook to sort of figure out where we are as far as possible in the number of female investment professionals. I've been running a number of industry lists for the organization and done a lot of research into the female leaders around the world in different asset classes and companies, etc. And also been working on our Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Award, which is fascinating because I get to see all of the different initiatives that big financial services companies are doing to try and change the dial, because it certainly feels like a time in the market. And you probably have seen all of the hype about Beyonce and Taylor Swift's concert being the largest grossing concerts, the first ever time that women have held that position. And then obviously the Barbie movie, the same thing. So it seems like there's a turning of the tide, if you will, into female empowerment. And so, yeah, my little area of the world is just in the asset management space.
So I haven't heard of Beyonce and Taylor Swift. I've heard of their separate accomplishments. So they're gonna join force and make $1 billion for one concert, or what?
Oh, I just think that well, from what I've read, the gross of the money that they made from concerts. I don't think they're doing one concert together. I thought it was separate, but it's the first time that women have held that position, right? Which is more to the point. And the same thing with the Barbie movie, which was directed by a woman. Again, there's not nearly as many female directors out there. So the female dollar is certainly, women are coming into having a lot of capital to invest and spend. More so probably than ever in history, and also there is a push not only for women but diverse perspectives tend to generate better return outcomes.
What were your thoughts on the Barbie movie? Seems like I didn't get it. I mean, I'm pretty smart, it's just that maybe I'm such a critic when it comes to movie that I'm not sure why people liked it so much or even needed a movie of this kind to understand like diversity. It seems like it was too low IQ for me. What was the message or the fun stuff behind Barbie's? I'm pretty sure Rotten Tomatoes would agree with that, by the way.
Yeah, so look, it wasn't my favorite movie either. It did have some good points, though, I think. And actually, one of them that I mean, I wouldn't say that it's something that people should start studying for, for the depth or anything like that. However, interestingly enough, a woman said to me the other day, that the part where they have the Kens turn on them, like turn on each other, so they can distract them, so then the women can take back the power in Barbie Land. Actually, that was quite interesting, and I hadn't really thought about it before, but the infighting amongst women is actually quite often what keeps us down, and that's probably going to be a controversial thing to say. However, there seems to be, with the younger generation of women, a much more collaborative and supportive approach to things, whereas historically it's kind of been protect your turf, if you will, because there hasn't been that many women at the top, and so those who were there would protect their turf, and I've certainly seen that. But it does seem to be changing somewhat. But it was an interesting observation, actually, on the film. But yeah, I don't think we need to go. I think we don't need to go any deeper into what it means or anything like that.
Yeah, by the way, Rotten Tomatoes totally disagrees with me. They gave it 88%. So maybe I'm gonna rewatch it. Maybe it was my mental state. I don't think it's controversial to say that like women keep other women down. It's just not women keeping other women down. It's women keeping everyone down to scale in an organization. Whatever male or female, I just think they want to have their spot, and they're being quite aggressive about it. That specific archetype, right? Because it's not everyone in a company. And I mean, that's okay in the corporate world. This is what happens most of the time. If you want to scale, you need to carve yourself a spot while not being a total arse about it. But I mean, that's what needs to happen. And it's interesting, yes, indeed, to see people take their place, like whatever their color or background. I do believe, like you and I were talking last time, that in the investment world, diversity of mind, aka neurodiversity, can potentially bring, or at least in my mind, can bring a greater return on investment, because it's just angle that we normally don't see. Nowadays, I'm listening to the book of Sam Bankman-Fried, ex-founder of FTX, and it's quite obvious that Sam didn't feel emotions, and when we try to think the way Sam thought and try to judge the way that in his actions and so forth, it's quite clear to me that we can't do that, because we just don't think or feel the same way. And I apart from what he did, right, like I do think he was really successful in the investment world. Before this all collapsed, he was really bad at leadership and accounting, but he was really good at making bets. And if we have a variety of people, odd folks in a company from different backgrounds, we cover each other's dead angles. So what do you think about that?
Absolutely. And I had a conversation with quite a successful investor, the CEO and founder of Stable Asset Management, Eric Serrano-Bernsen. He's someone else you should talk to on your podcast. But it was really his work that kind of got me down the path of this cognitive diversity angle. And they've built a business model on finding cognitive diversity. And cognitive diversity means that it is difference of life experience. And if you put those pieces together, then you can see opportunities that others can't see, and you can see risks that others can't see. And as we were talking about as well, Ray Dalio built Bridgewater on the back of that idea that he wanted to hire people that didn't think like him and come up with the same ideas as him. He wanted different people around him, so they could be additive to the team. So yeah, cognitive diversity is the key driver. And now the first and my area of interest and work, but the first area that you can easily say, and it is by no means limited to this, but gender is the easiest one to start with, right? Because 50% of the population are men and 50% are women or thereabouts. And there's been books written about it since, I don't know, the 50s or 60s, like men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We just have inherently different life experiences, different hormones, different chemical makeups and stuff like that. So of course, men and women are going to think differently. And so those perspectives on a team together are additive. And certainly in the focus of my work is that I think it's a good investment idea, right? And that's the first point, is that if you, certainly it's been more difficult for women and minority fund managers to succeed because it's just been so male dominated for so long. And so the ones who have significant experience now, I'm talking like 15, 20, 25 years experience now, they really grew up in the Wolf of Wall Street days, which is a tough environment. And if you were a woman or a minority and have persisted in that environment and subsequently been successful, then as a person, and not because you are a woman or a minority, but rather as a person, you are more likely to have traits of resilience, a contrarian point of view, be comfortable sitting outside the mean, etc. And these are alpha drivers. These are areas that are or attributes that we can say are likely to produce better investors. And so you can, at this current moment in time, you can use a diverse filter. So women is the easiest one to do, but actually it's not that easy because none of the databases genderize, even if that, I don't even know if that's a word, but they don't. And it's even more difficult to find racial minorities. But if you can use this filter to identify a subset of people, then you can start with a potential group of managers that probably have a greater chance of outperforming the market. And if you start with that subset and then define your strategy depending on which asset class or a type of investment strategy within an asset class, then you can pick the best ones that suit your needs. So that is really the area where like the reason why I'm doing it, built a business out of it. But if we can make money and also do some good at the same time, well, that's a double win.
Right. Why not?
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, can I prompt GPT to be diverse, so that it could give me a different opinion and a different point of view? And it seems that GPT is kind of woke, because when I tell it to be a woman executive, it tells me that like it cannot be a woman. When I tell GPT to be an African American gay man, it cannot be it, But when I tell it to be a seasoned marketer, it can't be that. So what do you think about that, and what do you think about AI providing neurodiversity?
Well, the AI has to learn from us, right? So, I mean, I really don't know about AI. If I say anything that doesn't necessarily fit here, but my understanding is that we have to teach the AI, and if we're only teaching it from one perspective, then there are going to be inherent biases in what it produces and learns going forward. So our biases are just going to, like, it's the biases of the people who are creating the technology, right, which is therefore going to be replicated. So I think we need to be very careful about that. How that actually works in practice, I don't know. But certainly in the funds management piece, I mean, what I would really like to prove, and I'm going to embark on doing some pretty serious research on this, but what I would like to do is say that, I mean, we can prove that if you you diversify across asset class to get a certain risk return profile on your portfolio, and then within that asset class you would diversify across geography and across sector to reduce your risk. I would like to see if we can somehow prove that if with the fund managers that you select. So I'm talking about the externally managed portion of an institutional portfolio, which is where an institutional investor would say, let's use $50 billion or something like that. Oh, no, let's say $10 billion, right? And they would give $10 billion out to external managers to manage. At the moment, almost all of those people would be white men. And so what I would like to see if we can prove is if we can actually get all of the women and all of the minority fund managers in one place. I'm going to start with the women because it's easier to find them. But if we can get them all in one place, then we might be able to do some analysis and see if you mix different gender profiles alongside doing the sector and the geography diversification, that you could actually improve the return profile. And that would be a game changer in terms of the way that institutional allocators allocate money, because that there would be, rather than my personal preference and my personal choice saying, I like Charles, I'm going to give him my money. Rather, you would say, well, I need to find at least three female fund managers, so I get the maximum level of cognitive diversification across my manager selection. And then the underlying managers that you choose, of course, it's important. But if we can prove that diversity at the cognitive level, very difficult to do, but I'm going to try. If we can prove that, we can change the way that capital is allocated.
Right. Would ADHD and being on the spectrum being forms of neurodiversity and forms of brain you would seek out to brainstorm together in a team?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that's really hard to, I mean, as I said, women are hard enough to find, but you can use algorithms to identify their most common names, etc. And then you can look on their LinkedIn and that you can check that, right? Race, people don't put that often. I mean, in some places it's illegal. I think it's illegal to ask for it in Europe. In Singapore, you can ask whatever you want. And I don't know about the US, for example, but maybe people don't want to put their race on there for fear that they will not get an allocation because they will be discriminated by that information. So race is more difficult. But if people volunteer the information so we can actually do the research, then that's excellent. Now, diversity, and you're 100% right in this. And I have a friend in Australia who is doing a lot of work in this because she has someone close to her who is neurodiverse. And I know some of the work that I've done on LinkedIn, she often adds to this, but that's very difficult to find, because then that becomes a diagnosis that may again be discriminatory. So yes, I do think that it's additive. How we're going to prove that, I think we're a long way away from as yet.
Yes, I very much agree with that. How can we break up the boys club, if these are old white males at the top and they've done some things a certain way and then they've used capital to maintain that power, they just did more of the same and what they were good at. How is it possible to break that and replace that with a new mentality?
Well, it's probably a multifaceted approach. First of all, they kind of have to retire, some of them, in certain locations, but that's happening, right? I mean, I'm not as young as I used to be. I have like 18 years experience now in the industry, so people will retire, and that means that old mentalities move on. That's the slowest approach, but it's happening, and then that makes way for new younger people with different ideas about how the world should be. And certainly, I think that a lot of the movements in the last couple of years that we've seen, like the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter, etc., has and the capability of social media to share these movements globally has put a lot of social pressure on companies. And they're certainly in financial services. I think people do want to change. I think that they do. And it's not everybody, but I think that there is certainly positive momentum. Actually changing that is more difficult when you have a fiduciary responsibility. And without having kind of this sort of hard evidence, which I'm talking about, to try and prove. Yes, there's a fair bit of empirical evidence that suggests that women and minority fund managers outperform, but it is inconclusive because sometimes they do in some asset classes, but it depends on who you've picked, etc. And so until we can get all of the data in one spot, which it shouldn't be, it might be hard, but it shouldn't be that hard. If there's only 13% thereabouts women out there, then we should be able to ask them all to put it together. But unless you can have hard evidence, it's really hard to convince everybody on an investment committee or everyone on a board that this is something that we need to do. So I think it's just a process. I'm actually launching a solution backed by a very forward-thinking Singaporean institution, which is super cool. And what we're doing is aggregating a group of female fund managers. So what actually happens is that not only is there this, okay, we presume it's unconscious bias and discrimination, etc., but that's not necessarily just it. That's part of it. But there's also, like, women have less networks, they have less access to capital. And so if I'm starting a fund as a woman, maybe I know 10 people who might give me money, but maybe my colleague, a man who went to the right university and the right school and blah, 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 he has 100 people to ask. So therefore, he's going to have 100 more doors to knock on to try and raise capital. So the man will probably start with more money. And in fact, the CityWire article, the Alpha Female report says that women fund managers have about, on average, half as much capital as men. So the women start smaller, and then because they start smaller, they often end in this, let's call it the emerging managers no man's land, which is, say, less than a couple of $100 million of assets under management, which then makes them uninvestable to the largest institutional investors. And so basically they just get wiped out of the allocation process, and they never really graduate from this no man's land, right? So not only it's difficult, it's hard to find them, all of this kind of stuff, but it's hard to invest in them because they're small. So there's a structural impediment that prevents institutional allocators from doing it, even if they want to. So what we've done is this is over the last 2 years, I've been developing this solution, which is essentially to aggregate a group of very high performance institutional quality female fund managers. And then what we do is we make their alpha accessible to the largest institutions in a cost-efficient, transparent, and risk-managed way. So essentially, it's a vehicle to enable these enormous guys out here to access these smaller people. And if we can do that, you can start to funnel large amounts of capital to these smaller managers. And this will be quite a groundbreaking solution, really, that has, I mean, my interest is gender, but it has the capacity to change the way that capital is allocated from large institutions to smaller managers. So it's just multifaceted. There has to be an investable solution for the allocators to be able to do it, and they have to do it within the boundaries of their regulatory fiduciary responsibility, all of these other limitations. So I think we're definitely on the path, but it's a challenging problem that needs a lot of people's input to solve.
Right. Agree with that. Your top 3 goals for the rest of this year, what are you focusing your time on?
Finishing the fund documents to set up the fund. That's today. And that's it. Getting the fund up. That's it for me. I'm just focusing on doing that and obviously my day job, but be focusing on that, being successful, and then having a holiday. I haven't had much of a holiday in a long time, so you probably know the same feeling.
Yeah, I didn't had holidays up until 3 weeks ago. They were not really restful, like when you haven't taken holidays in a while, it's restful, but it's like not restful, depending on what you plan, right? If you plan to book something and, I don't know, sleep for 12 hours per day, but else it's, us high achievers, we have a hard time sometimes shutting it down. What's your tip for managing with stress, by the way?
Oh, I like to run. I like to drink wine too. But that's probably not so healthy.
Yeah.
No, the running is good. I like rosé, but that's certainly not on your list of top tips, I'm sure.
In holidays, maybe. Thank you so much, Alexandra, for coming on today. Where can people find out more about you?
So LinkedIn is my medium of choice. It's just Alexandra McGuigan. I have my website, which is inclusiveam.com. If you are a diverse manager or a female fund manager, I want to know who you are, at least get on my radar, and then we can try and get some capital to you.
Love it. And I am Charles Cormier, host. That was another CEO Wisdom Podcast.com.